Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're diving into a shocking twist. Why did Tu Tieu's own mother refuse to see her? And what secret is Linh desperately trying to hide behind that cold lie? If you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. Ly Tu Tieu stepped into her mother's house like she'd stepped into a memory that suddenly didn't recognise her anymore. Everything looked the same. The old tiles, the faded wooden table, the familiar smell of herbal oil and dust. But the silence wasn't normal. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet that meant someone was napping in the back room. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a warning. "I'm home. Mom?" she called out, trying to keep her voice light like she wasn't carrying a storm inside her chest. No answer. She paused in the doorway, her hand still on the frame, her heart thumping with that strange mix of hope and pressure, because she hadn't come here just to visit. Not really. The secret about the asset transfer sat in her mind like a heavy stone. Every step into this house felt like stepping deeper into something she didn't fully understand. She walked in slowly, setting her bag down and glanced toward the hallway. Still nothing. She tried again, louder this time. "Mom, are you home?" The house swallowed her voice. Even the clock sounded too loud. Tu Tieu's fingers tightened around her phone. She dialed her mother's number, pressing it to her ear, listening as it rang and rang and rang. No pickup. She stared at the screen like it might suddenly explain everything. Like the phone could confess what the walls wouldn't. And that's when something sharp slid into her chest. Regret. The kind that comes late, after you've been stubborn for too long. She thought about how busy she'd been, how many calls she'd missed, how many conversations she'd cut short because there's work and we'll talk later. Later always sounded safe, until later became too far away. She lowered the phone and sat down on the chair near the table, the same chair her mother used to sit in while sorting vegetables. Tu Tieu looked around, noticing small details she hadn't paid attention to in years. An old scarf folded neatly, a cup washed and left upside down to dry. Signs someone had been here recently. So where was she now? What Tu Tieu didn't know was that her mother was there, just not where she could see her. Behind a half-closed door, her mother stood stiff as stone, one hand pressed to her mouth to keep from making a sound. Her eyes were wet, trembling with conflict. She wanted to step out so badly. Her body leaned forward like it was being pulled by years of love. But her fear pulled harder. She looked at the phone in her hand like it was a weapon and a lifeline at the same time. Then, with shaking fingers, she called Linh. The line connected quickly and her mother's voice came out thin and broken. "Linh, listen to me." She came back. "Tu Tieu is here." On the other end, Linh didn't sound surprised. If anything, her voice was calm. Too calm. The mother swallowed hard, eyes squeezing shut. "Don't let her see me," she whispered. "Please, I can't. Not right now." It was a turning point. One of those moments that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but inside it shatters something important. A mother asking someone else to chase away her own child. Contradiction wrapped around her like a rope. Love, guilt, fear, and the desperate need to avoid the truth. Linh replied softly, almost obedient. "I understand. Leave it to me." A minute later, Tu Tieu's phone rang. She snapped her gaze down, her heart jumping because for a split second she thought, finally, her mother. But the name on the screen was Linh. Tu Tieu answered, voice tight. "Linh, where's my mum?" Linh didn't bother with warmth. Her tone came out clean and cold like she'd rehearsed it. "She went to the countryside. She forgot her charger. She won't be back soon." Tu Tieu frowned instantly. "The countryside? Now?" "It's Tet season," Linh said flatly. "She had something to do, and anyway, the house has cameras monitoring. She knows you came." Tu Tieu's stomach twisted. Cameras. She lifted her eyes, scanning the corners of the ceiling, the living room walls, the hallway edges. Her gaze moved sharply, hunting for a lens, a blinking light, a wire, anything. Nothing. No cameras, No equipment. No sign of monitoring. Her voice dropped low. "What cameras, Lynn?" Lynn's response came without hesitation, like she didn't care if it made sense. "That's not important. You should go back. You have work. Don't disturb her." Disturb her. That phrase hit harder than Lynn probably intended. Because Tu Tieu wasn't some stranger knocking on a door, she was her daughter. And yet Lynn was speaking as if Tu Tieu was an inconvenience, an interruption. Tu Tieu's grip tightened around her phone until her fingers hurt. "Let me talk to her," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "Just for 1 minute." Silence on the line, just long enough to feel deliberate. Then Lynn said, "She can't. She's busy. Stop pushing." And the line went dead. Tu Tieu stared at the phone in disbelief. Her heart felt like it had been lifted up, and then dropped. She looked around the empty living room again, and suddenly it didn't feel like her mother's house anymore. It felt like a place built to keep her out. The emptiness wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Every quiet corner reflected back the same question: why am I being avoided? Her mind replayed Lynn's words: countryside, charger, cameras. It sounded so clumsy, it was insulting, a blatant lie. And what hurt most wasn't even the lie itself, it was the message behind it. Your mother doesn't want to see you. Tu Tieu swallowed, blinking hard, refusing to let tears fall here. Not in this room. Not in front of these walls that had seen her grow up. She stood slowly, her legs heavier than they should have been. She walked to the hallway, hesitating, listening, hoping for a sound, a cough, a footstep, anything. Nothing. Just the faint echo of her own breathing. She called out one last time, voice softer now, almost like a plea. "Mum, if you're here, just say something." No answer. The silence felt like the final decision. And somewhere deep inside her, hope cracked the way thin ice breaks, quietly, suddenly and completely. She picked up her bag, stepped back toward the doorway, and paused on the threshold. For a moment, she stared at the room like she was saying goodbye to more than a house. She was saying goodbye to the version of her life where she still believed love automatically meant closeness. Then she walked out. Her steps on the familiar road sounded too loud, each one pressing regret deeper into her chest. The pressure of the asset secret swirled with the pain of rejection, dragging her into an inner whirlpool. Because if her own mother wouldn't face her, what exactly was everyone hiding? And why did Lynn have so much control over this door? Tu Tieu didn't look back, but the phone in her hand felt heavier than any suitcase. It kept ringing in her mind, not with actual sound, but with the feeling of unanswered calls, unspoken truths, and a house that had become a symbol of isolation. By the time she reached the road leading away from the neighborhood, her expression had shifted. The sadness was still there, but something else was growing underneath it, a quiet determination. If she couldn't find clarity here, then she would find it somewhere else. And no matter how painful the truth was, she was done being pushed away by whispers and lies. She was going to understand what was happening, even if it meant confronting every secret her family had buried. Yuri adjusted the strap of his cucumber basket and stepped into the New Year's market, where Tet energy rushed through the lanes. Vendors shouted prices, families squeezed past with flowers and fruit, and laughter bounced between stalls draped in red. The air smelled of grilled meat and sweet rice, warm proof that the world still believed in fresh starts. He set his cucumbers down near a stall of kumquats and red envelopes. Fresh cucumbers, crisp and sweet, perfect for Tet. A woman tested one and asked the price. He named it a little higher than usual. It was Tet, and he needed the extra margin. She sighed, paid anyway, and moved on. After that, customers came steadily, some bargaining loudly, some rushing like they had 10 more stops to make before noon. Yuri kept the routine: weigh, bag, change, nod. The rhythm helped him stand steady while his thoughts drifted. They always drifted back to Tu Tieu. She'd left earlier with that tense focus she wore when something was pressing on her from the inside. Yuri didn't know every detail, only that an asset secret and a looming transfer had been circling their home, and lately Lin's presence seemed to sharpen everything. Too many helpful comments that landed like needles, too many smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Yuri didn't want to accuse without proof, but peace doesn't crack on its own. He sold faster as the crowd thickened. When his hand started to ache, he bit into a cucumber he'd kept aside. Cold, crisp, simple. For a moment it grounded him. Simple work still made sense. Honest labour still brought a kind of warmth. Maybe, he told himself, if he kept showing up, earning money, keeping the farm steady, standing beside his wife, those small, steady acts could hold their life together. But the market kept flashing togetherness in his face. Families teased each other over prices. Couples laughed while choosing flowers. Yuri smiled politely, yet worry stayed lodged in his chest. By late morning, the basket was nearly empty. A man bought the last of the best cucumbers for pickling. Yuri pocketed the money and stared at the bare bottom of the basket, surprised by the relief it gave him. At least this part is finished cleanly. He lifted the basket and headed home, carrying a little warmth from honest work, while one question followed him like a shadow. What if simple routines aren't enough to protect the people you love? Earlier, Tu Tieu had walked away from her mother's house with heavy steps. Lin's voice still echoed, cold and certain as she claimed her mother had gone to the countryside, forgotten her charger, and that the house was monitored by cameras. Cameras. Tu Tieu had searched every corner and found nothing. The lie wasn't even clever, and that hurt more. It meant Lin didn't care if she believed it, only that she left. Worse, it meant her mother had chosen avoidance. Hope collapsed into regret. Her heart felt like an empty room, full of questions that kept knocking. The pressure of the asset secret churned with the pain of rejection until she felt unsteady. She didn't cry on the street. She just swallowed hard and kept walking, and beneath the ache, a resolve formed. Quiet, stubborn, clear. If the truth wouldn't come to her, she would go find it. When Tu Tieu returned to the farm, laughter met her at the gate. A group of children sat in the yard with crayons and scraps of paper, pebbles scattered around them. They were drawing with fierce concentration, bright colours, messy joy. One child spotted her and squealed, "Chi Tu Tieu!" The others jumped up, waving their drawings. "We waited for you. It's Tet." Tu Tieu froze for a second, surprised, and something tight in her chest loosened. "You've been waiting here?" "Yes," a girl said, thrusting a paper forward. "I drew your house and the hut." A boy shoved his beside it. "Mine has chickens, huge ones." Tu Tieu took the papers carefully. The drawings were crooked and ridiculous, her house taller than trees, chickens bigger than a bike, but the warmth behind them was real. She smiled, and this time it didn't feel borrowed. "These are beautiful. You're all getting so good," she offered. "Do you want to come inside for snacks?" "No!" they shouted instantly. "Outside. We want to play outside." Tu Tieu laughed softly. "All right. Outside it is." She put her bag away and returned with chalk. Kneeling, she drew a grid on the ground and announced, "We're playing Owen Kwan." "Teach us," they begged. So she did. How to place pebbles, how to count, how to move them square to square. She repeated rules patiently, corrected mistakes gently, and cheered their little victories. As the game went on, her mind shifted. The empty room feeling didn't disappear, but it stopped taking up all the space. The scattered pebbles became fragments arranged into pattern and play. For a while, she wasn't the woman carrying secrets. She was simply Chi, guiding them through a folk game, watching their faces brighten with each turn. Yuri arrived as the yard reached peak chaos. Kids cheering, pebbles clicking against chalk lines. He paused at the gate, watching Tu Tieu laugh, noticing how her shoulders looked lighter than they had that morning. "Uncle Uri!" the children shouted. Yuri lifted his hands. Okay, no pushing." He set the empty basket down and pulled out thin bamboo pieces. "I made something for you." The kid surged forward. He handed out bamboo dragonflies, small, careful toys. "They'll spin," he promised, "but you have to paint them first." He brought out paints, and the children sat immediately, brushing bright colours across bamboo wings. Red and blue and green smeared over fingers and cheeks, and nobody cared. Tu Tieu watched with soft eyes. Yuri stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm better right now." Yuri didn't push. He nodded toward the house. "A grilled pork! Tell them to wash their hands!" The word pork sparked instant screams. The children ran to wash up, clutching dragonflies like treasures. When they returned, Yuri helped them perch the toys on low branches. One dragonfly spun in the breeze, and the kids gasped. They ate together in the yard, simple food, shared jokes, sticky hands, bright eyes. Eventually the children began to leave, bowing and calling their thanks. "Thank you, Tu Tieu. Thank you, Uncle Yuri." When the yard finally quieted, the silence felt different from the one at her mother's house. Soft, not cruel. Tu Tieu looked at the chalk grid and scattered pebbles, like fragments that could still be arranged into something meaningful. The secrets and lies hadn't vanished. The questions were still there, but as the painted dragonflies turned gently in the wind, a quiet optimism settled in her chest. She would seek clarity, and she would not let deception steal every piece of warmth from her life. Tu Tieu returns to her mother's house, hoping for answers, but the home feels unnaturally silent. After repeated calls go unanswered, she receives a cold phone call from Linh, claiming her mother has gone to the countryside and that the house is monitored by cameras. Tu Tieu senses the lie. There are no cameras, yet the avoidance cuts deep, leaving her hurt and determined to uncover the truth behind the asset secret and her family's sudden distance. Meanwhile, Yuri goes to the bustling Tet market to sell cucumbers, trying to stay strong despite growing worry about the tension at home. When Tu Tieu returns to the farm, a group of children greet her with handmade drawings and eager laughter. She teaches them the folk game, or Quan, finding brief comfort. Uri joins, gifting bamboo dragonflies, and the shared joy brings a fragile peace.